माइक ओपन रिव्यू कर दिया क्या कैमरा कर दिया पीछे क्या
नहीं
तो कह रहे थे कैमरा में काफी बहुत है पीछे का वहाँ पे हो गया ओके
All class 9.
Okay, so hello everybody, good morning and welcome to the EduphoreIAS, the Hindu analysis. And today, as you know, the date is yes, yeah, date is so of course July 4th, and we'll be starting with the first page or the front page of the today's Hindu. Okay, so फटाफट से हम ये देख लेते हैं what is important, what are the news or the articles important from this page. Left, right, दोनों साइड आपने देखना होता है so that कि कोई भी अगर आर्टिकल्स इस साइड में अगर आपको इम्पोर्टेंट दिखे तो वो हम फर्दर इनसाइड पेजेस पे डिस्कस करेंगे, ठीक है. सो वन बाय वन वी हैव लुक टू दिस आर्टिकल्स और दिस piece of news. So let us first is NCP electricity power plants party and symbol. Remember this is totally more of a politics, but what is important from this is the anti-defection law. Fine. So anti-defection law will discuss this law only when we'll be waiting for the moment that how this whole this political drama is going to unfold fine in the coming days, because this has been seen even assembly speaker confirms the receipt of disqualification petition against 9 MLAs. So if speaker disqualifies the 9 MLAs because of anti-defection this activity, because of defection activities, and we disqualifies this under anti-defection law, then we'll be discussing that, fine. But we'll be waiting for that how this the whole episode is going to evolve, fine. So that's why we won't be discussing today, because currently only the politics is going on. So PM to host this Xi Jinping, Chinese president, and Mr. Putin, Shehbaz Sharif, basically Prime Minister of Pakistan, virtually for SCO summit. So this year's SCO summit we are going to hold it, fine. SCO summit we are going to hold it. Of course we have the presidency of this year's SCO CHS. CHS is basically the Council of Heads of State, fine. That is Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Councils of Heads of State. Our Prime Minister is basically going to chair this today on Tuesday. So today is Tuesday, and under this we are going to under this SCO summit there are 4 outcomes likely to be signed. So for the so she said 4 outcomes will be adopted at the summit, including the of course wherever New Delhi Declaration. Remember this, for example, if something is such kind of meeting is going on in Moscow, so we say Moscow Declaration. So wherever this or whichever country is basically hosting this summit, so that's why it is known by the name of the capital of that country, fine. So this is known as New Delhi Declaration. And 2 joint statements on countering radicalism. Radicalism is you can say extremism or reformism, where the people believe in taking radical steps. Especially this is more in more true in political and social sense, fine. At the political and societal level, where you want to radically reform something which has been there since ages, fine. So and a digital transformation as well. So 2 joint statements. First is on countering radicalism, fine, or extremism you can say, and second is on digital transformation, fine. An agreement further on an economic cooperation initiatives is being negotiated. So this is the 3rd one. I said 4 total. So first is under New Delhi Declaration there will be 4 outcomes or agreements to be concluded, and the first is of course on countering radicalism, second is on digital transformation, third is on economic cooperation, fine. Though it is unclear whether all countries, especially India, will sign it or not, given past differences with China over the Belt and Road Initiative. Of course, we have an issue in the past as well with respect to the Belt and Road Initiative, fine, because it passes through under Belt and Road Initiative. China is basically focusing on it is developing infrastructure projects across the countries or the continents even. So one of the project that is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which passes through our POK, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and that's why India has reservation over this BRI project. Fine. So this is one of the issues. That's why time and again when we discuss something with China, we discuss about the sovereignty issues. Fine. And that's why India is not a part of this BRI project, because it somewhere transgresses our territorial integrity. Because POK, we do believe that POK is a part of Pakistan, Jammu and Kashmir only, integral part of Jammu and Kashmir, and in sense integral part of India itself. Fine. So that's why China is somewhere violating our territorial integrity. That's why we are not part of this BRI schedule to China. Fine. So that's why here also the cloud of this BRI project could be there as well, and that's why it might happen that India may not sign this agreement related to economic cooperation. Fine. The virtual summit, originally planned as an in-person summit for the leaders in Delhi, has now been truncated to a single session by video conferencing. Fine. And much of the time will be okay. Fine. No need to go into that. So these are the three things, three agreements plus New Delhi Declaration. So total 4 outcomes going to be, going to come out of this SCO, Council of the Head of State, Summit or the Conference. Fine. So just keep in mind this much. Now left and right, let us quickly see that what else is important. So water wars, Tamil Nadu flags shortage in its share of Kaveri water. So this water war is going on. Every you see the river disputes. Fine, in India as well, between two sets of states or more than two states. Fine, like SYL canal issue between this Punjab and Haryana. So similarly, Kaveri disputes between Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and fine. So next is the tarnishing of Putin's aura of power. What went wrong for Russian president? We are not going to that. NCP split, again politics, no need to go into that. Then you have India meets Kuwait in SAF summit clash. Fine. This match, which is going to be held in Kuwait. Of course, Kuwait. So again, not that important. Now on this side, rightward side, ST wants submitted report on law and order in Manipur. Fine. Supreme Court actually give details of money spent on ads. Supreme Court ने कहा है सरकार को, Delhi government को basically to give details on money spent on ads. ठीक है? So keep tracking this. If something substantial come out of this, fine. Judgment. And CBI files fresh charge sheet against Lalu Prasad Yadav, RJD chief. Fine. This much. So not very much, not too much important articles on the left hand side or given the right of columns, but I will see. Discussing of course editorial pages and then op-ed pages, next page, page adjacent to editorial. So for the time being, Indian refiners said to start tanking yuan for Russian oil, okay, and Central agrees to deploy additional armed forces for Bengal Panchayat polls, okay. Pending for 2 years, SC to take a plea against dilution of Article 370 on July 11. So you know that 370 article has already been, this. You see, this Article 370 of the Constitution deprived Jammu and Kashmir of its special privilege and led to the bifurcation of the then state in 2019. So, bifurcation of the Jammu and Kashmir in 2 UTs of Jammu and Kashmir and 1 UT of Jammu and Kashmir and the other UTs of Ladakh. Fine. So these are. So of course, this now the Supreme Court is going to take up the plea filed against this removal of the special status of Jammu and Kashmir under Article 370, and this is going to be taken up on July 11. So we'll be again keeping tab on this for further developments. Fine. Then politics going on here only. Share details of money spent on advertisements. Supreme Court tells Delhi government. Fine. So whatever substantial coming out, we will be focusing on that. For the time being, we can safely skip the political angles. Fine. Again, politics going on only. So let us quickly shift to the editorial pages and see what important today from this page. So in short, mutiny, the establishing of voting sort of power, we are not going to that. Okay. Smoke and mirrors. Remember, we can skip the articles, especially those which are not directly impacting India. This article is more or less about the history of Russia and even the history of the Russian president or the prime ministers. Fine. So not much important for us or from our country's perspective, of course, but we will be discussing definitely this one because this is very, very important article for the day. India should refuse America's NATO plus bet. Fine. So we'll discuss what exactly is NATO, what exactly is NATO plus, and why India should refuse to be the part of the NATO plus group, which America actually wants to make India a part of it. So we'll be giving that. We'll be discussing this in detail as well. Fine. But first of all, let us start our discussion with the smaller article, clearing the water. India must give a bigger push to scheme to deliver potable water. Currently one scheme is going on, that is Nal Se Jal, because the focus is to provide all the rural households of the India tap water facility by the end of 2024. Fine. By the year 2024. So we'll see, we'll compare that where actually what was the status of this supply of this tap water in the rural areas, especially prior to the launching of this scheme, and now what is the current status of, how much this population we have been able to cover. Fine. Post announcement of this major scheme. Fine. Har Ghar Nal Se Jal. So let us quickly have a look at this. So access to potable tap water is a basic necessity indeed. However, of the roughly 25 crore households in India, talking about 2016, the year 2016, where we are talking about 25 crore households in India, a tap water connection that delivers 55 liters per capita every day means per capita per person per day. Not per capita but per person per day. Okay, so that is what per capita basically. Day of potable water is rarity in most of rural India. So even 55 liters per capita per day or per person per day, supply of potable water is somewhat used to be rarity in India, which accounts for about just 90.5 crore households. In August 2019, Prime Minister Modi promised that rural households would be assured of piped potable water by 2024. Fine. When he made this announcement or commitment, only about 3.2 crore or about 16% of the rural households were so connected to the piped water or tap water. Okay? So in 2019, when Honorable Prime Minister announced this scheme, only 16% of the rural households were connected to or getting the piped water, fine, or potable water. Today, this figure has gone to 64%. So you can see the massive increase in the percentage of this potable water being supplied to the rural households. A substantial increase, but still below the target. Because today, why is below target? Because today you see we are in the month of July 2023, but the coverage is just 64%. So I think what has been mentioned in this article is skeptical, the authority is maybe skeptical in whether the government will be able to meet its target or not, because meet its target basically because next year is going to be the election year, fine, and once the mode of product comes in, then of course there will be somewhere the project should be acted as well. So of course in the recent years, like COVID-19, to a greater extent, like lockdowns and all, have impacted the swift implementation of this project alongside the Russia and Ukraine this conflict as well, because somewhere it hampers the supply of basic, let us say, raw materials, whatever will be required for the supply of this potable water. Fine. So supply chain disruption as well. Okay, so in recent years, the Jal Shakti Ministry, which has labeled this plan of providing piped water connection as a Har Ghar Jal Mission, has consistently underlined the scale of the exercise. Since 2019, about 9 crore households have their own exclusive access to piped water. Fine. So since 2019, about 9 crore households have their own exclusive access to piped water. Okay, earlier it was just 3.2 crores. This is apart from connections to village schools, anganwadis, and community buildings. So this is apart from these three things: village schools, anganwadi centers, and community buildings. Yet, for all this scale, it is unlikely that all of the rural India will be connected by April 2023, as per Mr. Modi's claim. It is unlikely that all of rural India will be connected by, it should have been April 2024, not April 2023. The COVID-19 pandemic and the Russian-Ukraine war reportedly caused the mission to slow down considerably, government officials claim, by impeding access to pipes and civil construction necessary to enterprise. Realistically, it is unlikely that even 75% of the households will be connected by this time. While this too, by no means is an insignificant achievement, the challenge is the reliability of these numbers. So of course, even the target of the 64% achievement from 16%, or let us say even if you be able to achieve 75% of the targeted, out of 100%, let us say, we make the target up to 75%. So it is by no means a less insignificant achievement. Means even indeed this too is a significant achievement. Fine, but the question is about the reliability of the figures, the data. 75%. So whether this is authentic, or if the government is saying this much, to what extent there is reliability of this figure. Fine. So the figures reported by Jal Shakti Ministry, which is taking care of this project called Har Ghar Nal Se Jal, solely based on data reported by states. One proxy that presents a discouraging picture is the number of villages that have been certified as Har Ghar Jal, or having all houses fully connected to this potable water supply chain. Only 1,68,157 villages have been reported by states as Har Ghar Jal, and only 59,000, or about 35%, have been certified. Fine. So the whole issue is the reliability of data. Being their Gram Panchayats have formally acknowledged compliance, the overwhelming fraction of villages have somewhere between half or 3/4 of their households connected. An independent assessment commissioned by Jal Shakti Ministry sampled about 3 lakh households. So we have a crores of households, but the ministry has sampled just 3 lakh households. Fine. In 13,300 villages, and reported 62% households as connected in October last year through piped water. Fine. So that is good, but too small a sample, means just 3 lakh households out of crores. So it is of course a small sample to be representative. It also emerges that the large states with 100% compliance, that is Gujarat, Haryana, and Punjab, already started on a fairly high base in 2019. So here it is being said that we say that Haryana, Gujarat, and Punjab has achieved its target, being a larger state. So this has been possible not because they started on the similar lines as has been the case of other states, but the base effect matters, because in 2019 these states were ahead to their the similar peers, let us say, or the other states. Fine. So that's why we see that these are the bigger states though, but they have been able to achieve or meet their targets. Fine. So this all happened because of the base effect from where they actually started in 2019. Already substantial things has been done. Fine. It's not like they started from zero. So the center must put in place a mechanism that discloses the scheme's performance on the ground in a transparent way. So what is the suggestion? That center should come up with the transparency, that data should be transparent, then it will be able to better analyze this scheme. Fine. Next is India should refuse America's NATO plus bet. Now what is the story behind this? So remember, there are many things, what exactly is NATO? Then we'll be knowing what is NATO plus. So NATO is basically a security bloc which works on the principle of collective security. Now what does collective security means? So remember, collective security means, let us say you people, let us say you and your friend or friends, let us say you guys are a group of 4 or 5 friends. So what happens if somebody, let us say from another group, attacks to one person of your group? Collectively all of your friends would what? retaliate against that particular person. Fine. So इसमें क्या होता है कि एक के ऊपर अगर अटैक करती है कोई कंट्री, so सब मिलकर उस पर रिटेलिएट करेंगे. That is the called collective security principle. Fine, or doctrine. Okay, so NATO works on this principle. For example, let me relate this with the current Ukraine-Russia was going on there. So, though Ukraine is, remember, not a part of NATO, and that's the reason that the whole issue that flared up or going on between Ukraine and Russia is because of one major, contentious issue, and that was Ukraine wants to be part of NATO, which Russia, vehemently opposes. Because once Ukraine becomes the part of NATO, means NATO is going to be, at the, coming at the door of Russia. Fine, because of course Russia shares border with Ukraine. So this was one of the apprehensions, or this is one thing which Russia actually didn't, doesn't want. So of course this is one thing. So remember, first of all, the background is NATO came or originated in the backdrop of World War II. Fine, and it came in the year April 1949 precisely. Fine, under NATO treaty itself, or you can say Washington Treaty. Today, NATO has around 31 members, and the latest and the most current member is the Finland, which joined it in the year April 2023 only. Fine, 3 months back, and Sweden is in attempt to get the membership of this bloc. Fine, so Sweden is again negotiating with the NATO to become its members, and in the meantime as well, even Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky is being, he also wants to be part of this NATO. Fine, which remember Russia is totally against this. Fine, so hope you understood that this is one of the major factors that why this conflict going on between Russia and Ukraine. Okay. So let us quickly have a look at this, that how India should refuse to be America's NATO plus bet. And NATO plus is NATO plus 5 allies country of the US, let us say. Fine, we'll see that includes Japan, Australia, Israel, and all. And America wants to make India even the part of NATO plus countries. Fine. Okay, so quickly, first the background. So it was during virtual press briefing in March 2023, and on the North Atlantic Treaty Organization focus on South Asia and the Indo-Pacific region that the United States permanent representative to NATO. Like we have permanent representative to United Nations, so so on the similar lines, US has its own permanent representative to NATO as well. So Julian Smith, he was quoted as saying that the NATO alliance is open to more engagements should India seek that. So he said that NATO is open to further engagements, or more countries can come on board with or join the NATO, and India should seek that. What should seek that? That India should come forward to be the part of this bloc. This is what said by the permanent representative to NATO, Julian Smith of US. Fine. Reflecting the same sentiment, the US House Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party (CCP) in May 2023. So this was not just said by that India should be the part of NATO, NATO plus. In fact, NATO plus by one of the permanent representatives of the United States (US) in NATO, but also said by the House Committee, US House Select Committee, that is the Committee of Parliament of course US. In May 2023 recommended strengthening the NATO plus framework by including India in the grouping. So what was the reply from India? So led by our India External Affairs Minister, S. Jaishankar ji, he rejected this idea by saying that NATO template does not apply to India. Fine? Because remember, by joining NATO, the issue is then Russia, it would be something like that we are going against Russia. Fine, because Russia is altogether, already what's going on with Ukraine and this. Russia, one of the major reasons was that Ukraine is seeking to be the part of NATO. Fine, the same thing. I mean, not such kind of situation emerges from because we are not a border country sharing border with Russia. But of course, you can understand that in the international relations, today's friends, tomorrow enemy, today's enemy, tomorrow's friends. So anything can happen. Okay. So yet on the eve of Prime Minister Modi visit to US in June 21 to 24, 23, Prime Minister was in this. So US. So in June, Senate India Caucus co-chair Mark Warner shared his plans to table a bill to bring India into the NATO plus fold. So 3 times or 3 different attempts have been made in US or by the US representatives, fine, to make India part of NATO plus. So that's why the author is writing that India should refuse America's NATO plus bet. I hope you got the idea. Okay, so quickly now, NATO and NATO plus. What are these two, blocks, NATO and NATO plus? So one by one we'll see. First is NATO. So NATO is a transatlantic military alliance of 31 countries. Fine. As I said already, NATO came into being in the backdrop, the background of World War II in the April 1949 under NATO Treaty, or we also call it the Washington Treaty. Fine. With the majority of the members from Europe, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, many thought that NATO would lose its relevance. Fine. On the contrary, NATO has not only survived but also expanded, with Finland joining as its 31st member. I have already told you in April 2023. So this is the latest country which has, or the most recent nation which has joined NATO bloc. Remember, and Sweden waiting in the wings. Sweden wants to be part of NATO as well. NATO appears to be getting the much needed ground for survival, thanks to Russia's tirade against it and the invasion of Ukraine. So because of Russian invasion and its tirade or opposition against, you can say, NATO, it is getting the required fuel for its survival. With NATO swelling its expense, some analysts even see the onset of Cold War 2.0. NATO Plus refers to security arrangement of NATO and the 5 treaty allies of the US, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Israel and South Korea as members. So NATO Plus means NATO 31 members plus 5 allies or the treaty allies of US, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Israel and South Korea. Remember, almost we have good relations with all of these 5 countries. Fine? To enhance global defense, objective क्या है? To enhance global defense cooperation and win the strategic competition with the Chinese Communist Party. Fine? So I hope you understood the purpose of NATO Plus. Now here is the catch, that why we should refuse to be the part of this bloc, because the objective of this NATO Plus, I am talking about not the NATO only. So objective of NATO Plus is to enhance global cooperation, defense cooperation. Up till this, it's fine. And next is problematic for India, and to win the strategic competition with the Chinese Communist Party. Though we also want to win this, but we cannot come under any treaty or agreements like this to announce openly that yes, we want to compete with the Chinese Communist Party. Fine. Of course, we have our own set of issues with China, but still, it cannot be like any third country is dictating or interfering in our dealings with any other country. Fine. So of course we will be dealing at our own terms. Okay. And our own interests. So interestingly, the term NATO Plus is not an officially recognized or established concept within NATO itself, but has been used in discussions and debates regarding the potential expansion of the alliance. Remember. So this is how the UPSC frame questions in prelims generally, that you might be given question related to NATO and NATO Plus in fact, and they could ask you that NATO Plus is an officially recognized established concept within NATO itself. But remember, it's not. Fine. This is how we get trapped into the statements. Okay, so the inclusion of these countries as members would require a complex process of negotiations and assessment of their compatibility with NATO's principles, obligations and defense commitments. So being member of NATO is not that easy. That's why US has its own route to make NATO Plus with its allies countries, find 5 members, where even it wants to make the 6th or even include India as a 6th allied country. Fine. But author is saying that becoming a part of NATO or becoming a member of NATO is not that easy, of course. So while NATO's earlier target was the Soviet Union and now Russia, the focus of NATO Plus is clearly on containing China. Containing China, focus on the words. So of course we cannot come in direct confrontation with China. Therefore, considering its dispute with China, India remains a missing link in that framework. Fine. US wants to take advantage of the situation that going on between India and China. Fine, because we are not sharing good relation from the last few years. Fine, like two countries. So it wants to, or it believes that India is the only missing link in this NATO Plus framework because India is even not at good terms with US. Okay, in light of increasing regional security challenges, India joining the NATO Plus. Now the plus and minuses, what are the advantages of joining and what could be the negatives of just joining the NATO Plus. So India joining the NATO Plus framework would provide it with a security umbrella with protection and deterrence against potential threats. Of course, India could also gain access to advanced military technologies, intelligence sharing platforms, and interoperability with other member states. Fine. So we can get strategic, benefits or advantages by joining NATO Plus, but this could potentially strengthen India's defense capabilities and modernization efforts. Indeed, but this bit needs to be assessed in the larger context of India's strategic autonomy. Okay? But when it comes to the question of India's strategic autonomy, means how independent or autonomous we are in dealing with or taking strategic, decisions with respect to some other countries, especially the countries with which we are not sharing the good relations, for example, China. So whether we should take decisions based on what US is saying to us, or we should be autonomous or strategically independent in taking our own or making our own decisions with respect to dealing with China. So of course we should choose the later one. Okay, so what are the issues? The first is getting into any NATO framework will annoy Russia and China. Of course, नाराज कर सकता है दोनों Russia and China को. Apart from the robust strategic partnership with Russia has been useful to India in dealing with regional security challenges and importantly moderating the stance of China. So of course, since China and Russia shares good relations, so Russia can influence the China to in moderating its relation with India as well, isn't it? So of course, Russia is important even today for us. We cannot go against Russia. Fine. Even though Russia is getting over dependent on China post the war in Ukraine, Moscow remains a valuable partner for India. Indeed. Now, should it join in one stroke? India's solidified strategic partnership with Russia will crumble. ठीक बात है कि अगर India join करता है NATO Plus को, so of course our strategic relation with Russia might crumble. ठीक है? Balancing these relationships and managing potential geopolitical consequences would be a significant challenge for India. Now, what is the challenge for India? To balance the relationship with respect to different countries or countries with the different sets of interest, like balancing our relation with Russia one hand, US other hand, China, again. So, and at the same time, managing potential geopolitical consequences, both positive consequences and negative consequences, would indeed be a significant challenge for us moving forward. Second reason, while aligning with the US-led alliance system may be tempting due to the threats posed by China, let us say, it could ultimately prove counterproductive and detrimental. Author is saying that though it can be productive to join such a NATO plus bloc led by US, considering that we are getting threats from China's side, but it could ultimately prove counterproductive and detrimental. How so? Detrimental is harmful, of course. Having a military framework will limit India's freedom of action and prevent it from pursuing an independent policy towards China. This is the downside of becoming a part of a military bloc. Moreover, at a time when India has its own bilateral issues with China and a strategy for the Indo-Pacific, hopping into the Taiwan strategy of the US under NATO Plus will complicate India's security with the possibility of Chinese justification for further military build-up along the India-China border and frequent intrusions. Now, what is the meaning of this paragraph? So remember, China time and again, wants to acquire actually this Taiwan. So on the one side, the US has promised to provide security to the Taiwan in such a scenario where China wants to acquire or attacks this Taiwan. But if India, let us say, becoming the part of a military bloc, remember NATO is a military bloc, fine. So a NATO plus military bloc led by US, then China might take it as an excuse in order to further transgress or further interfere in on the border areas, especially, or the kind of transgression China is making today or from the last few years with respect to the India-China border, fine, and even build up of the infrastructure alongside the Arunachal border and even from Uttarakhand side, fine. So of course, further this could be justified by China. Such kind of steps it is taking on the basis of that India is somewhere coming in between Taiwan and us, that is China, right? After becoming the member of NATO plus. Third is, India has traditionally maintained a policy of strategic autonomy, allowing it to engage with various nations and blocs based on its own interests. Joining NATO framework would require India to align its defense and security policies with the objectives and strategies of the alliance. Of course, if you want to be a part of any bloc, you will have to in fact align your defense and security policies with the objectives and strategies of the particular bloc. So somewhere it would be like sacrificing our strategic autonomy or independence, fine, which we cannot, thereby potentially undermining India's autonomy. While the non-aligned policy will get quick death, it would strain relationship with the countries, especially neighbors and regional organizations that value India's independent stance, and could also limit its flexibility in engaging with other regional powers. So of course these are the downsides of joining this bloc. This is NATO plus. Okay, so what should be the India's priorities, or what should be our priority areas? So India's priorities lie in addressing its own regional dynamics that include a unique set of security challenges such as border disputes, terrorism, and regional conflicts. While NATO has certain competencies to deal with such issues, its largest geopolitical agenda, starting from Eurasia to the Indo-Pacific, may divert resources and attention away from these pressing issues and therefore will not be of much help to India. For the time being, India is posturing through the Quad. Okay, so in this paragraph, the writer is mentions the things because he is saying that India should first focus on the neighboring countries, the border issues. Alongside that, India should also focus on where the terrorism and regional conflicts. Fine, because once India becomes the part of NATO plus, remember, we have to divert our resources from dealing with such issues of terrorism, regional conflicts, and border issues to aligning with the objectives of NATO plus. Somewhere it would be again not advantageous for us. Fine. So therefore, the time being, India is posturing to the Quad. Quad, is a four-member, alliance or group where we have India, India, Japan, Australia, and US. Quad, that's why four countries. Quad, security dialogue. The Asian NATO as per China. So China has labeled this Quad as Asian NATO, remember, already. Okay? Looks more promising than the NATO plus bet. Though China remains an elephant in the room during its summits. Fine? So though China remains one of the biggest topic of discussion or elephant in the room during the Quad summits, but of course, because China is not in good terms with either US, Japan, even Australia, and of course India. Fine. So you see that when you are not at good terms with your four of your friends, so all four of your friends would try to project themselves at one united front against you. Fine. This is just the general this analogy of this whole this Quad and NATO plus thing. So this is a very, very good article. You can see there are lots of things here from international relation perspective. This forms a part of your GS2, of course. So a very good piece of article. You must read it, revise it, and you may also use some of the pointers from here for further building of your GS answer writing skills. Fine? Okay, so now the next article is related to the COP28 already we have discussed a lot about this, which is going to be held in to be hosted by UAE, United Arab Emirates, to be held in Dubai. Fine, this is only. So let us quickly have a stock take before the global stock take. Fine, stock take. Okay, so here writing is what he is writing all about is of course the Paris Climate Agreement, Bonn Conference, COP28 upcoming, then COP27, which was concluded in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Fine, last year, and then of course finally he is focusing on the most important most important contentious issue in this climate agreements or there's negotiations, and that is the issue of finance, which is very, very important. So we'll come to that as well. Quickly, one by one. So the Bonn Climate Change Conference, Bonn is in Germany. Recently, the last month only, this Bonn Climate Change Conference was concluded, was the last big milestone in climate negotiations before the first global stocktake under the Paris Agreement at COP28. Remember, Paris Agreement was concluded in the meetings of COP21. COP21 is a conference of parties, countries or the parties you can say, which took part in this such kind of conferences. So COP21 took place in December 2015, Paris. That's that Paris Agreement. Remember, this Paris Agreement has officially replaced the Kyoto Protocol, and Paris Agreement is, remember, a legally binding like Kyoto Protocol. Fine, but Kyoto Protocol has been replaced by the Paris Agreement. So at COP21, so Paris Agreement in 2015 or COP21, which named as Paris Climate Agreement, actually had one of the provisions to have the first global stocktake. Global stocktake is nothing but to analyze or to have detailed discussions and let us say evaluation of whatever steps we have taken since 2015. Let us say till 2022, fine, or let us say half of the 2023. So to evaluate that whatever steps we have taken, whether these are sufficient to arrest the increasing or the rising temperature, fine, the global warming or the climate change as a indirect and direct repercussions, fine. So this was the basic thing. Global stocktake is nothing but stock taking or evaluating the steps and the measures that we have taken till now in order to halt the rise in global temperature or the global warming, fine, or the climate change you can say. So let us quickly have a look at this, what exactly this article mentions or talks about. So this COP21 took place in Dubai in December. The global stocktake is mandated under Article 14 Clause 1 of the Paris Agreement to assess collective progress towards long-term global goals. This includes progress on greenhouse gas reduction, building resilience to climate impacts, and securing finance to address climate crisis. So these three things have been mentioned under this. First is greenhouse gas reduction, second is building resilience to climate impacts, and third is securing finance to address climate crisis. Fine. So these are the three things mentioned under this. The outcome of the global stocktake will inform countries on how to operate and enhance their actions. So in 2015, under the Paris Agreement, countries had agreed to pursue efforts to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This was, this was agreed under the Paris Climate Agreement in COP21, December 2015. That the Bonn Conference was held in the context of overweening emphasis on restricting global average temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius as compared to pre-industrial levels was reflected in the negotiations. So this Bonn Climate Conference that was held in Bonn, Germany last month was basically in the context of giving overwhelming emphasis on restricting basically the global average rising temperature below or keeping it below 1.5 degrees Celsius as has been agreed under Paris Climate Agreement. Fine. The two agenda items that were discussed under Bonn Climate Conference were the mitigation pathways compatible with the temperature goal and climate finance. So mitigation pathways, that how we are going to mitigate the rising global temperature, let us say, and second and most important was climate finance, flows from developed countries to developing countries to enable them to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. So first, The whole issue is that since developed countries or the industrial nations are the ones who are responsible for the today's rising temperature or the global warming, so they therefore should compensate the developing countries, fine, in order to check this or halt the rising global temperature, fine. So that's why we have this provision of climate finance made under Paris Climate Agreement, where developed nations or the industrial nations in particular were asked to basically compensate to the developing countries through financial flows, alongside through green tech transfers, basically, fine, green technology, so that the this transition of developing countries to more greener of course greener, let us say, technology or greener industrial production and all could become smooth, fine, so that they do not face much trouble, because of course all major developing countries and the poorest countries facing the major issues of the finance. When you don't have money, how you can think of becoming let us say investing in green technologies? So of course that's the major issue. So with Article 4.5 of the Paris Agreement remained points of contention between the developing countries and the developed nations, of course, because developed nations wants other developing countries as well to mobilize or be the part of mobilization of overall funds, because they do not want to compensate the developing countries in entirety. And the Environmental Integrity Group represented by the European Union and others. Fine. So point of contention, that is the global finance, remains contentious issue again between the developing countries and the Environmental Integrity Group led by the European Union and others. The signal from the Bonn conference was that developing countries too need to be more ambitious in their emission reduction if the world is to limit rising global average temperature in the context of adequate finance being provided by the developed North. North-South divide is not into the developed nations, South are the developing and poor nations. Fine, so just transition pathway. Two things mentioned under this Bonn conference, that is transition pathways, fine, and how to restrict the rising temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius, and the second was climate finance. So that's why we are going to discuss one by one both these things. On June 14, climate change negotiators arrived on a compromise on one of the aspects which relates to the work program on just transition pathways. The subsidiary body, so just transition pathways, subsidiary body adopted the draft text aimed at working on just transition pathways, and the output will be placed at COP28. So just transition pathway is nothing but the mitigation strategies and the pathways that we are going to take in order to have just transition, means a smoother transition towards more greener economy, let us say, or better future, that is climate resilient. Right? The parties to the Paris Agreement had introduced just transition pathways at COP27. Remember now, parties to the Paris Agreement, that is COP21, or the December 15 agreement, came as Paris Climate Agreement. Remember, it introduced just transition pathways at COP27, which was concluded the last year at Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt. Fine. So remember not to confuse yourself, that is just transition pathways not there since the Paris Agreement. Fine. Rather, this was introduced only in COP27, the last year. Okay. COP28, this year going to be held in Dubai. India's climate policy is derived from the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. So there is a famous, this common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. So what is this? Now remember, earlier it was called just CBDR, that is common but differentiated responsibilities. Now what does it mean? It simply means, this phrase means that common, let us break this word by word, common but differentiated responsibilities. Because climate change to halt the rising temperature is a common objective of every nation, of course, because whatever would be catastrophic impact of the climate change would be borne by not just developed nations, or it won't be asking you whether you are developing, but every single nation will have to bear the consequences of this global climate change. So therefore, the objective is common, to halt the rise in temperature, global temperature, or the global warming, or to halt this climate change. But common but differentiated responsibilities. The responsibilities to mitigate or to tackle this climate change is differentiated or different for different countries. How so? Because some countries are developed, some are developing. Fine. So those who are developed, or those who are actually responsible for the today's catastrophic events related to climate change or the global warming, because they are developed on the bone of these industrial productions. So at that time they recklessly and ignorantly polluted environment. Fine. They emitted lots of carbons. Fine. The result of which we are of course facing today or bearing today. So it becomes responsibility of those nations, those set of industrial developed nations, to come up with more of let us say funds and to transfer the green technology to the developing countries, because they are the ones who are suffering, who are the sufferer ones. Fine, because of their own activities in the past, not developing but developed nations activities or the industrial nations. So therefore, common objective is of halting the global rise in temperature or the climate change, and कॉमन बट डिफरेंशिएटेड रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज की डेवलप्ड नेशन है उसकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी अलग होगी, डेवलपिंग नेशन है या पुअर नेशन है उसकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज अलग होगी. फाइन. सो दैट्स व्हाई द डिफरेंट रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज एंड रिस्पेक्टिव कैपेबिलिटीज कि सिर्फ इतना तक सफिशिएंट नहीं है कि डिफरेंट रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज हो, बट जो कैपेबिलिटीज हैं, बिकॉज नॉट यूएस एंड India doesn't have the same kind of capabilities with respect to both finances and even technology and economy level as well. So therefore respective capabilities की जिस country की जैसे capabilities है उस हिसाब से वो steps लेगी. Respective capabilities. Fine. So this is the CBDRC. In its long-term low emission development strategy at COP27, India underlined the need for financing. Fine. A just transition in sectors such as energy and transport in order to reach net zero emissions by 2070 as has been promised by India. So India of course focused on the financing at COP27. Thus just transition means that transformation pathways need to be carried out in a way that it has fair and inclusive as possible to everyone concerned. Fine. So this is just transition. The transition should be a smoother one. It shouldn't be a one-off event or sudden catastrophic event. Fine. India is concerned about the difficulties it is going to face in decoupling its economic development from greenhouse gas emissions. India also stated that the route to just transition needs to be clubbed with the means of implementation. So of course, just transition, just talking about just transition is not sufficient, but also we'll have to talk about the means to that transition, means resources basically, that how we are going to move on this pathway. Fine. So we need to have all the implements and tools. So the adoption of the just transition pathways in the draft text of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This is a body which actually under which aegis the United Nations Conference on Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, under which the COP meetings are basically organized. Fine. COP 28 meeting that is going to happen. So under the aegis of UNFCCC, basically this all COP meetings takes place. Okay. So UNFCCC's subsidiary body of implementation is also aligned with the Paris Agreement strand, which is self-differentiation grounded in the idea of nationally determined contribution. So another aspect of this Paris Climate Agreement is NDC, that is nationally determined contribution. That is, each nation will determine that how much contribution it is going to make towards this just transition. Fine. And India has of course promised, or actually every country needs to submit its NDCs to the UNFCCC Secretariat. Fine. In order to, because under this you are mentioning in advance that how much let us say renewable energy we are going to generate in the upcoming future. So there are different sets of, like for example we have promised this Panchamri. So where we have promised like that we are going to be carbon neutral, or we are going to reduce our carbon intensity to GDP fine by 50% by the year 2030, let us say, we're going to have our, half of the renewable, energy requirement through renewable sources by 2030. Fine. So these are and we are going to have, almost this carbon sink equivalent of around, 1 billion of this tons of carbon sink we are going to, create. So these are the, the NDC, that is nationally determined contributions. These are the contribution actually determined by India, which is going to, contributed by India with respect to the halting of rising temperature or meeting the targets of this emission reduction or climate change. Right? So these are the goals or the contributions submitted by each and every nation. Fine. That what it is going to, what steps it is going to take in future to follow this transition. So this bottom approach was inserted in the Paris Agreement with the idea of allowing developing countries which face special needs and circumstances to align their low carbon development pathways that integrate socio-economic components in line with the state-determined development priorities. In the Bonn negotiations that was held in Germany, developing countries were also to strengthen the just transition pathway as opposed to the developed countries, which laid more emphasis on mitigation. Right? Okay, so these are the issues related to the mitigation. Now let us focus on mobilizing finance. Climate finance now are not aligned with the priorities identified by countries in their nationally determined contributions. In the domain of international monetary transfers, accounting remains highly contested because many observers say that only a fraction of $100 billion has actually been realized. Fine. At the 2009 Copenhagen Climate Change Conference in 2020 was made the deadline for developed countries to jointly mobilize $100 billion a year of climate finance for developing countries. So this was promised that in Copenhagen, it was talked about in the Copenhagen Climate Change Conference in 2009 that by 2020, I have already, in many of our previous discussion, I have mentioned this, that by 2020, developed countries were to, give out around $100 billion to developing countries in order to have this smooth transition or to cater to the needs of their funding requirements. Fine. But this has not yet happened, and many of the, there are many different reports coming up with that how much have been able to mobilize out of this $100 billion. So this is yet an unfulfilled dream. Okay? So additionally, adaptation finance has lagged behind mitigation finance. Fine. Probably due to the absence of universally agreed upon metrics. At the conference, the Environmental Integrity Group led by European Union insisted on the mitigation work program to be held in the finance, a move to somewhat degrade from the transfer of a major portion of international public finances from developed countries to the developing countries. The objective of the mitigation work program, as per there are two different programs we will work on, mitigation work program and adaptation work program. Okay? So mitigation, where you are going to mitigate the impact of already carbon-based emission, and adaptation is you are adapting the better, or let us say cleaner or greener set of technologies, and of course energy pathways as well for future. Halting the rise in temperature, let us say, or for the future course of action, or let us say sustainable development. So as per the COP26, now COP26 held in Glasgow, Scotland, remember, is to urgently scale up the mitigation ambitions and implementation in this decade in a manner that complements the global stocktake. So the focus of this integrated group led by EU is on the mitigation work program, and that will be complementing the global stocktake. Fine. Next is the program will work along a number of lines, which could include organizing workshops to identify policy and technology that are actionable solutions. In the efforts towards aligning climate finance with the Paris Agreement temperature goals, it is important to integrate the World Bank in climate change negotiation. So here, the author focuses on, or because the World Bank acts as a financial, let us say, secretariat for many of these UNFCCC bodies. So that's why, to a certain extent, he is also focusing on making this World Bank as an important or integrate the World Bank in this process of global climate change negotiations. and hold it accountable as it is making huge investment in fossil fuels. Therefore, the pursuance of the global stocktake as per the Paris Agreement needs to comply with the principle of equity, justice and fairness. So of course, the Paris Agreement के अंदर जो global stocktake की बात हुई है वो that should be in conformity fine with these three things, that is principle of equity, justice and fairness with respect to the divide between the north and south. When I refer to north means we are talking about the developed nations, and we are referring to south means we are discussing about or talking about the developing nations. So this needs to be taken care of so that it should be an inclusive transition. Fine. Taking on board both the developed and developing nations alongside the poor nations. Fine. So it should not be like developed nations, always, having this unfair, practicing the unfair and all that set of principles. Now there's the legality of the Delhi Ordinance. I think we have already discussed much about this Delhi Ordinance. I'm just giving you the brief, not going into the detail because we have already discussed a lot. Remember what happened with this? This issue of this power rivalry, you can say, going on between the central government and the Delhi government, or particularly the Delhi government and the LG of course appointed by the president, or you can say the central government of course, so representative of central government. So the whole issue came up related to the appointment of officers. For example, if in Delhi, but we should not forget that Delhi is also the capital, alongside that Delhi is UT as well. Fine, it's not a complete independent state. Fine. So there, it was between the, let us say, the whole issue was related to the powers that's been given to the Delhi, that whether Delhi government could appoint the officers or not. So in its judgment, the Supreme Court, which came up with its judgment. So under its judgment, Supreme Court said that, of course, gave the judgment. The judgment was given in favor of Delhi government. But after that, the central government intervened and formed a committee of 3 members, which 4 members in fact, which would comprise Delhi Chief Minister alongside 2 IS officers. Fine, one is Principal Home Secretary and the other is Chief Secretary of course. So of course, again you see that here the majority is with the IS officers, and those of course the secretaries, Home Secretary and Chief Secretary, and both of them are representative somewhere, you can say the central government of course, because the body DOPT, Ministry of Personnel and Training, which takes care of governs the service rules and all related to this. So of course Delhi government has reservation that somewhere it is against basically the judgment of the Supreme Court. So this was the ordinance actually, which was of course Delhi Ordinance. So ordinance is what? Ordinance is when Parliament or the Assembly is not in session, so government come up with the ordinance which would be having the same power and authority or the enforceability, fine, equivalent to this particular law, fine, passed by the or acts passed by the Parliament or the Assembly, fine. So for this time period, let us say government is going to, now we are going to have our monsoon session. So in this session, the central government will be introducing this Delhi Ordinance in the Parliament, and Delhi government, or particularly the Chief Minister of Delhi, mobilizing the forces of the opposition parties in order to oppose this Delhi Ordinance, fine, in the Parliament, especially the Rajya Sabha, so that central government won't be having its final say in the appointment of officers. So this power rivalry or this contention or the issue is going on between the 2 sets of government, let us say government of NCT, that is National Capital Territory of Delhi, NCTD, and the central government related to the appointment of the, of course, bureaucrats or the officers in this in Delhi, fine. So this all is about, this whole of the article is about this thing only, that is taking the legality of the Delhi Ordinance, fine. So whether this is illegal or not, so of course this is overriding the Chief Minister, the validity of the ordinance, because ordinance is valid for only 6 months, fine, and it can be, remember, ordinance can be issued only in the extraordinary circumstances, not like this, that when one of the sets of the judgment has come up, so you are coming up with some ordinance in order to have, in order to change or in order to declare null and void the judgment, or let us say supersede the judgment. Fine. So of course somewhere the legality, of course the case will be finally resting up with the Supreme Court, because this was this ordinance was introduced in the aftermath of the judgment of Supreme Court. So of course the things need to be clarified by the Supreme Court itself, when some things like this going to happen, where the government might have its edge, or the central government, let us say, coming up with the finally passing on this judgment ordinance, coming up as a bill. So of course then the Delhi government would be having issue with this ordinance, because this is giving an edge to the central government, or of course led by the bureaucrats in appointment of the officers. So of course Delhi government won't be settling with this, and then of course would be approaching again the Supreme Court. Fine. So this whole depends on how the situation is going to unfold once this ordinance is going to be introduced in the of course this parliament. So what is the gist? So this ordinance formulated by the President on May 19, amending the Government of National Capital Directorate of Delhi Act 1991, took away the services from the jurisdiction of the Delhi government. The services had been earlier restored to the Delhi government by the Supreme Court in a landmark judgment delivered on May 11, 2023. So basically this ordinance is taking away the services from Delhi government as well. Fine. No authority is empowered to direct anyone that an order of the court shall have no effect and shall not be followed. And since the ordinance does not cite any new ground for nullifying the judgment, it becomes legally unsustainable. Fine. So ordinance is not making any ground for nullifying the judgment which was delivered by Supreme Court on May 11, 2023, where it is given where this judgment was in favor of Delhi government, giving this primacy to the Delhi government in the appointment of officers and of the central government, or led by LG. So of course there is through this article the author is writing PDT Acharya, he happened to be former Secretary General of this Lok Sabha. Okay. So he is writing and he is saying this ordinance is going to be very unsustainable. So the ordinance confers the powers of posting, transfer and disciplinary matters on an authority named the National Capital Civil Services Authority, consisting of a chairman and 2 members. Fine. The chief minister is made the chairman, and the chief secretary and the home secretary are the other members. So you see the 3 members, but the majority lies with the civil servants or the bureaucrats appointed by the central government. See. So that's why. And here the chairman though is CM, but even if CM is not in consonance with, let us say, he is not in agreement with what decision going to be taken. So of course the lead or the majority goes with the bureaucrats. So again he is giving an upper hand to the central government, or the LG in appointment of the bureaucrats. Fine. So that's the major issue. Though CM is part of it, but he is in minority. Fine. With respect to the final decisions. So that's the whole issue. So of course the answer is no, this ordinance is not going to be, somewhere it seems to be illegal in the sense, but of course we know, we can take comment on the reasoning or rationality of this. So of course finally we will be keeping tab on this and when it is going to be passed from the parliament, and then we will see that how again this case goes back to the Supreme Court, and how the Supreme Court now takes up this matter. Fine. Okay. And so situation improving in Manipur through those slowly state SC, that's very good. After so many, after months, now the situation is, of course, Modi meets Council of Ministers, speaks of Vision 2047. Okay. So again, not much here. Again, politics only. Fine. Let's quickly have a look at that. Okay, so human error led to Balasore train tragedy, reports is pinning blame on signal department. So of course this was saying that it happened because of human error, and that human error was related to the signal department. That the signaling personnel which was charged with, which was responsible for signaling, shifting or change. Of course this happened from his end. Fine. Okay. Finally, Israel, global news or international news, Israel targets West Bank with drones and troops killing 8 Palestinians. This goes on, I mean when you see something going on like this in the investment region and all, because the conflict remains persisting between Israel and this Palestine. Okay, so finally, manufacturing growth eased in June. Standard & Poor's Global India Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index (PMI) is to 57.8. Fine, I have already discussed this as well, that something like if PMI is more than 50, it means it is indicating expansion. Fine, means positive growth. Below 50 means what? Contraction. Fine, negative growth. And 50 means neutral. Fine, no change. So new orders grow at fast clip, compelling firms to ramp up output at pace. That is among the fastest in 18 months. Business raise output charges. So this seems to be positive one. Momentum moderates, but because it is easy to 57.8 from 58.7 in May. Means in June we have some contraction, not expansion, with respect to, of course, the previous month. But overall, this is in the contraction expansion zone only, because this PMI is more than 50. Standard & Poor's Global Survey Best Manufacturing PMI hints at slight moderation in momentum even as new orders stay strong. Strong demand. What are the factors which is keeping this expansion as elevated? So strong demand, uptick in output is called firms hire to more workers, though at pace similar to May. So of course more hiring, more employment. Overall business confidence rose to a 6 month high. So of course when business confidence rises, of course they are going to, businessmen are going to invest more, and when investment more means production more, and for that we need more labor. So of course more employment. Okay. Positive demand dynamics, greater labor cost push charge inflation to 13-month high. So positive demand dynamics, of course when you have more of demand, less of supply, you have inflationary situation, and greater labor cost push. So of course when you have more of labor or cost push inflation, demand pull and cost push. There are two types of major inflation basically. So RBI reports 76% of the 2000 notes returned. I hope all of you have returned the 2000 notes. Isn't it? Okay. Returning, the last date is 30th September, of course. Okay. Finally, that is on the sports page. Okay, so we have discussed whatever were important from whatever articles were important and miscellaneous facts important from the previous point of view as well. From the 4th of July, this 2023 Hindu analysis. If you have any query, you can put the comment in the comment section. Until then, take care, revise, and stay tuned for tomorrow's Hindu analysis. Thank you.